Call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Sophie? Here. Counselor Savage? Here. Youth Representative? Counselor Fleck?
Here.
Counselor Stennon?
Here.
Counselor Urban?
Here.
Counselor Robert?
Here.
Mayor Gowing?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have 2 items to be added to the agenda, so I entertain a motion for accepting item 6C for OLCC liquor license and 8C Economic Development Administration for Bohemia Foundation.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 4 is appearances of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. This is the time for citizens to comment on the items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council's discussion on that item. Council will not engage in any discussion or make any decision based on public comments at this time. However, the council may take comments under advisement for discussion and action at a further council meeting. And it looks like everybody signed up to talk on items not on the agenda. So before we get started, there'll be no applauding, no heckling, no cheering when people talk. So just keep the comments, whoever's speaking, speak, and those in the audience listen. Start with Mark Sanzo. It's Mark Sanzo, S-A-N-Z-O. Seeing none, we'll go to Kathleen Matson.
Good evening, council ladies and councilmen. And, well, I'm sorry I missed meetings, but it couldn't be helped. And so basically, you know, I've been updated recently. And I'm very saddened on the agenda items that pop up all of a sudden before a meeting, and then a work session is not mentioned until the last minute. And I feel it's unfair for us as a community, you know, the folks that live here, to, you know, that these things we can't research in time. Sometimes when we can't. Another thing is about what's happening here in Cottage Grove. Reminds me of when President Biden first took office, and he had those stacks of black books to sign, executive orders, you know, stacks, a mountain high, and to change America, to change everything about us and our values. And it's happening here. Everything's getting stacked up and pushed with the progressive, liberal, evil agendas. And we have always been a hometown of family, representation, and with high values. And people are just surprised what's happening here. And I just hope that you all, think about everything. And then the money too, taxpayers' money, going toward these off-the-wall things that are brought to the city manager from wherever, oh, we would like to have our program in Cottage Grove. How about it? We need this amount of money, but how about it? Just to change things, to make it more of a city, not a small town. And like this bike thing, where people enjoy going on the paths, walking, or taking their bicycles as a family. And then what? We're going to see these electric bikes going boom by. It's not a city. We only have so many destinations. But please keep in mind about the sad, progressive, liberal agendas. Our state of Oregon is a progressive, liberal state. And they're just certainly wanting to change Cottage Grove, to what they want. And another thing is that I'm thankful that the site isn't at the 99 site. And like I said, I have missed meetings. And I don't know if there's other proposals for a homeless site or a houseless site. But it's just sad that it's still near schools, where the Nazarene Church, they can walk right down the road to the high school or take Bryant Avenue. Kids go off to play. I see these young 12, 13-year-old boys, taking their fishing poles, walking down Bryant Avenue to go fish in the river, And kids will be very uncomfortable. And then our parks along the river are going to get trashed out. And then needles. And it's just sad. Anyways, please, keep our family-oriented town in mind for the values. And thank you for listening.
Merv Quint?
I've never done this before, but I'm Merv Quan, and I live on Anthony Avenue. And I saw my neighbor had sent me a copy of the Sentinel of their proposal to make the Nazarene Church a homeless camp. This is a totally stupid idea, whoever came up with that. I mean, that's a residential area, family-oriented, low crime, at least as far as I know it's low crime. And we don't have homeless camps. I don't want a tent pitched in my front yard unless the city wants to pay for an automatic gate to be put up around my house and my property there to keep the homeless out, because they'll just encroach into other areas. Why would anybody want to put them in downtown in a residential area to begin with, instead of keeping them out of town or something? I mean, it's like Eugene or something. Or I see tents right here alongside the city hall. And, if you like them so well or want them to be in your neighborhood, put them at your house. Don't put them in mine. I don't want them in my neighborhood at all. It'll lower our property values. It'll increase the crime area. Well, police will just have to patrol the area constantly, because even though most of us have like ring alarm or cameras or surveillance and stuff like this, it just infuriates me enough. My brother even called me, which he never does, but what's his opinion of not wanting it, not, I know it sounds like not in my backyard, but that's exactly what it is. There's gotta be other places that aren't sit in the middle of town or sit in the middle of a residential area. You know, that's all I want to say is I just don't want it on them. I don't want to drive down the street and see that I have to have my wife armed all the time going to work because there will be somebody that can accost her or something like this, or any of us that are walking the area or live in the area there, because of unknown people living, whether they're high or low, whatever it's said on there, you know, threats or whatever they are, but just, I sound like I'm just rambling here, so I didn't think I was going to be talking in front of anybody, but I've sent emails to all the commissioners and the mayor. All of you got a little note from me this week, probably yesterday, telling you just no on South End. There's got to be some other options, and I'd just like to hear what they are. But,
We're not going to engage with you right now, so.
well, I'm married already, so. Take that I did Gene with you, or something. Okay. Anyway, I just want to say no to the church. All right, take the church back. I'll put it that way, but not the homeless camp, not in the residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Mike Grover.
Well, I never thought I'd ever come to another council meeting after 24 years of listening to all this. Here I am. After being the police chief here in Cottage Grove for 24 years, I sort of know what's going on in this area. And then having lived in Cottage Grove for over 40 years, the last time, went all through high school, grade school, when it was a little bitty town. Regarding the church going into a homeless community, homeless people attract homeless people. That's a fact. If you're going to get more and more homeless people, I'm not saying it's a crime to be homeless. I'm saying we don't need them in Cottage Grove. We have enough of them. And it's going to increase the traffic, foot and car traffic in the neighborhood. And that neighborhood is it's pride of ownership. It's probably the nicest neighborhood in Cottage Grove. Everybody mows their lawn, they paint their house, they don't park wrecked cars all over, the garbage is taken care of. It is one of the nicest areas of Cottage Grove. And if we put that homeless camp there, it's going to attract crime, lots and lots of dope. There's going to be all kinds of dope over there. There's going to be meth, there's going to be marijuana, you name it, it's going to be there. Crime, it's not going to be the crime where you murders and stuff like that. What it's going to be is somebody steals a registered guard out of its paper box in the morning so they can read it. They're going to defecate all over your yards. Their dogs are going to be all over. It's really not good. And they'll camp anywhere they can. It doesn't matter. And you can see that in Eugene. They camp anywhere. The cost to fix the park underneath the bridges up there, they got to dig down 18 inches and replace the dirt because it's so polluted because of all the camp. One of the big things, it's going to reduce the value of homes in the neighborhood. And that's something that I think a lot of these folks here are really thinking about, you know. With the price of everything today, it's, you know, it's something that we really have to think about. think that's about all I have. But I hope that changes some of the people's minds. Can I ask a question? Does anybody live in the neighborhood over there? You answered that. Thanks.
Art Lancaster.
My name's Art Lancaster. I don't actually live in the neighborhood, but my granddaughters and grandsons do. I'm actually on 16. When they wanted to put in the low-income housing in the field, our property values dropped, but our taxes went up. Go figure. Nobody wanted it in the neighborhood, but they fought and fought and fought. Thank God the government ran out of money, because that's where the money was going to come from. However, I don't think the police department is going to have to want to dedicate policemen to police that area to protect our grandkids and our homes and our pets. This is the wrong place. Why is it every time you want to do something for the homeless or something like that, you want to attack the residential areas? There's too many other places that they can go and still be close so they can get what they need. But you're trying to destroy neighborhoods. We all know there's a homeless problem. We aren't the ones that caused it. And neither are you. This happened a long time ago when somebody in another city basically invited the homeless to this state. But please, don't do this to my grandkids. I have very lovely granddaughters, and they will no longer be able to walk through there if you put that homeless camp in there. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Chuck Howell.
I'm a little nervous, so excuse me. I would just like to bring to the committee's, council's attention that everywhere that this activity has begun, it has gotten bigger. It has now spread. Go into Seattle and see how they're handling what they brought there. Spend some more money. That just feeds the basket that's the industry of homeless people. People are taking advantage of the homeless people by bringing them to places so that they can have a huge government fee off of the money that is allocated to them. There's $1.9 trillion was granted to rebuilding this country. I don't see how spending millions of dollars on homeless people. I mean, I have all the compassion in the world. I don't like to see, every time I see a homeless person, I try to talk to them and find out what their condition is, to see what they're doing, to see if I can help them. It isn't that. It's they're being forced into these little groups to do this by organizations. And the organizations put them in there and they say, here, good boys, go ahead, we'll keep paying you. How much do you need? I think that's probably what's going on here. When we say, oh, we got to do this real fast because the government only has so long for us to take $500,000 from the government. The government doesn't have any money. It's part of our money. We've been doing this for so long, it's pathetic. And I just slow down, get a little excited because I see what happens. And I see the harm that it causes. The root cause of being homeless is something that we need to address. But we can't destroy communities. When we do it, you people are the people who are charged with protecting this city. You're charged with protecting the people of this city. When something like the proposal of putting a homeless shelter in the middle of a residential neighborhood seems okay to you, and okay that you can do that to the people in that area, you either don't understand what it does to the values of the city, you don't understand what it does for the costs of the city, you don't understand how it hurts people who have a life. That's the first point. That's the end of that point. This situation of the homeless people we have Seattle and Portland. We have two cities that were once beautiful and prosperous and people like to go to. The people are moving out of that city as fast as they can. Nobody wants to go to Seattle. Nobody wants to go to Portland unless, of course, they're getting a government check. Okay. The overall costs are not what it costs to buy the church or to organize it into a homeless city. It'll be a little homeless city. The drugs will come. The police won't even go there. And that's another part of the whole situation. I'd like you to rethink where we can put it, where we can really make a change. It doesn't work the way that we've been doing it to try to buy our way out of homelessness. We've got to get those people working towards it too. They need to participate in the recovery. We aren't making them recover. We're keeping them there. We have to keep them there because we have to get paid. The government will give you money. They'll say, okay, you can pay. How much time do I have left? Is that 12 seconds? Boy, I don't know. I could talk about this for quite a while. I've seen a lot of it. Just this city is a community, and everybody that lives here, I believe, wants to keep it that way. That's basically it.
Thanks.
I urge the city council to consider the thoughts of what they are doing when they place this in a residential neighborhood in a community.
Mike Lancaster.
Good evening. Sorry, I might be a little bit nervous. I haven't spoken in front of a group like this in a while. I live on Anthony Avenue. I've lived here pretty much 38 of my 42 years on this earth, and I've worked through hard times. You know, I went from owning my own home to not, to almost being homeless myself several times. And I worked through it and built myself back up. I finally am in a place to where I feel my kids are safe. You know, they are the ones playing in the street, walking to school, playing with their friends, not having to be concerned on whether or not they're going to be attacked, you know, trip and fall on a needle. I've also witnessed, I started off working at Price Chopper. So I got to witness when we had 2 homeless people in this town. And every time that we try to give them help, give them a handout, it gets worse. I mean, I left for a couple of years when I got a different job, came back, and there was tons of homeless people here. Talked to homeless people that said they were on their way here because of all the gifts we're giving them. We're not helping these people, we're enabling these people. And we have to find a way to stop making the situation worse. I don't know what that answer necessarily is, but I can definitely say the path that we're going down is not healthy. And I hope that we can all pool our resources together somehow and find a way to actually help these people versus just giving them another place to congregate, branch out. A lot of the times we like to throw out if we can save just one. Well, how many people have to be victimized, hurt, addicted to drugs, trying to save that one person? And that's not a ratio I want to gamble with. I like that my kids can go out and do what they do. Like when I was a little kid, I used to go out in the morning and come back at dark. You can't do that with these people around. And that's an unfortunate thing. Not all of them are bad, but there definitely are a bunch that are. And there's a bunch that don't care. And I know wouldn't want to have have it on my conscience that by trying to what I believe was helping these people ended up victimizing, little kids, adults. I'm not a homeowner. I ain't worried about my property value, but I wouldn't want to be able to. I couldn't live with myself if I knew one child got hurt by moving these people this close to residential area and schools. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks. Martin Girardi, did I say it right?
Scary. Anyway, we live at 1312 Bryant Avenue, which is the closest property to the home site or the proposed home site, right across the street. Moved there 7 years ago. Obviously wouldn't have bought it 7 years ago had me any inclination of that happening. There's been a lot of great points made tonight. We agree with them all, my family and I. But the one I do want to ask is, it's been mentioned a couple of times about home value. And I'm curious if the city is going to be prepared to make up the difference to people that have to sell their homes. If we take a 15% hit in our value. So I know you won't answer that tonight, but I think it's something you need to think about. Quite honestly, I can see that bringing up future lawsuits, homeowners towards the city. So I just think it's a legitimate question. I would like to get an answer at some point. That's what I got.
Thanks. Curtis Tuning.
Well, I'm Curtis Tuning. I live on South End Street. I'm the homeowner. And I've lived here a long time. And I've even went to school with half these people here. Now notice nobody's brought up the plaque that's up front in front of you that says All American City, 68 and 04. I was here for both those times. And it was great. But we're not becoming an all-American city anymore. You think bringing in the homeless and welcoming them here to this town does not state that we're an all-American city. We're being laughed at. You know, I've seen a lot go down in this town, and a lot of it I approve. But when the city bought the armory a few years back, that I did not approve of. And if you want to set a homeless camp in the middle of a neighborhood at a church site, which taking our kids to, because they have a playground, because we have no park there, and that church is like a sanctuary for kids who won't be safe there. But it's not going to be that way. I've seen it in Portland. I used to work on the highway a lot. Retired from that. And I've seen it, people just defecating in Portland because of this problem. And it's happening here. I take my dog for a walk around the city water treatment plant, and I can't even do that anymore because they're out there dumping their piss, shitting all over the place. So I had to stop going and I had to find new places. You know, and the parks aren't even, you know, safe enough except for the one with the balloon because it's out in the open. But I'm telling you that this is going to be a problem. We've tried hard to make that neighborhood safe in our neighborhood. There was a lot of theft here years back, and I was willing to help solve some of that by hand, keeping them out of our neighborhood. And it's going to be a problem. And turning that church into a sanctuary for homeless is not the key. You have that Frisbee disc place over by the sewer treatment plant. Put them over there. They're secluded. Most of them are over there anyways, in and out. Or put them in the armory. Make it a mission. I donate a lot to the mission in Eugene because of the problem. I don't like to see it either. But I've already raised my kids. I don't want to be taxed on something for somebody else's kids. It's a problem. My kid left this town because he didn't want to come back. He saw what was happening. He's a regional manager of Yellowstone Park. I put my kid through college to get there. Really proud of him. And people could do that. These homeless, you can put them in school, get them going, do something. Instead of wasting our time and our taxpayers' money. We're still paying on the high school, which we was told that it was only going to last for so long, but it didn't. It's still going on. And I'm sure a lot of these other people feel the same. As hardworking people like me, going out and making a harder living earning, if you want to take a third of my money away from me in taxes already, and you want to tax more of it to where I only make half of what I usually make. Now with inflation and everything, now I understand that you're getting paid from the state to have these people come here and get reimbursed for it, but turn the armory into one. Whether you want to watch them, there they are. Watch them right there. Or like I said, put them in some secluded area, like the treatment plant. I mean, who plays Frisbee disc? I did it once. You know, if you want to change that, put it in the Bohemia Park on the north end, and hardly anybody's there. Do that there. But don't destroy our neighborhood. I've worked hard to build my house there, and I don't want to see my property values go down. And I've seen it happen, theft in our neighborhood, and it's finally coming to a stop. Anyways, you know, I just get frustrated about this too. And they made their bed, make them lie. I made mine, and I feel comfortable. And I'm sure half of these people who are in here do the same. Anyways, thank you.
Thanks. Carol Woodman.
Good evening. Mine is a response to Councilor Roberts, remarks in the Sentinels last week about when he said that he would like the shelter on M Street to emulate what the Eugene Mission does. They have low, medium, and high barriers. I've been a homeowner in Bryant for 30 plus years, where I raised my children, and I have enjoyed living in a quiet, safe community. Wasn't always easy for me because I too was homeless with two children, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. But I worked hard, and I know it's not easy for everyone, to own that home. And sometimes it was hard when I owned it because I was afraid I wouldn't have the money to pay the property tax and I might lose it. So, and I'm sure there's others in the neighborhood that can relate to that. We live in a working class neighborhood and work hard for what we have. Opening a low barrier homeless shelter in our neighborhood would bring the value of our homes down. Why do we have to pay the price of sheltering the homeless? Whose responsibility is the homeless? Is it the city's? Why are we spending thousands of dollars on a shelter anyway? Is it the best solution for the homeless? Is opening a low barrier shelter with no restrictions where people can come and go as they please, be under the influence of drugs and alcohol, have a criminal background, and where bags are not checked and could be carrying weapons, a good option for the homeless in this established, safe, quiet neighborhood? However, I am sympathetic to the homeless situation. And so I called the Eugene Mission and spoke to the executive director today to learn more about their low barrier program. And it isn't anything like the low barrier shelter that was discussed at the April 5th town hall meeting. And I also had a question about that because I didn't see any homeless people involved in that meeting, so I wondered about that. So anyway, the Eugene Mission as a nonprofit is not have federal funding. Their low barrier is a secure campus that allows people to stay in their emergency shelter for a maximum of 15 days, but if they leave, they lose their spot and need to wait 30 days to be allowed again. Pets are not allowed unless they are service animals, and then they have to have tags that show that they have rabies vaccinations. They have a zero tolerance for drugs, alcohol, or marijuana consumed on or proximity to the campus. They help people and have a positive impact on the greater community. So, but she said, the executive director said, when Eugene Missions first started, they didn't have a secured campus, and people could come and go as they wished. A 3-block radius of the shelter, people in a 3-block radius of the shelter, people set up tents, and there was criminal behavior. This also caused problems in the neighborhood. If there are no conditions on people receiving services, it doesn't help the homeless because people won't seek services. People didn't want to leave the encampment because they were afraid of losing their stuff, and they wouldn't go for services. The low barrier programs are being sold to communities, and there's tons of money to be made in this area. We need to show people are in better condition when they leave. But statistics show that low barrier peoples leave in worse conditions. It's not something I make up. This is coming from the Eugene Mission that we want to emulate. Please do not shift the city's homeless situation to the established friendly neighborhoods in our city that are ill-equipped to deal with the situation and will be forced to pay the consequences. This will create more problems than it solves. And I'm not just talking about the neighborhood I live in. I mean, I'm talking about any neighborhood in Cottage Grove. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Williamson.
I want to see if it's okay if I change the subject. Is this the right time for me to talk about the city grant program? I'm here representing the Singing Creek Educational Center. We're applying for a grant from the cities.
Yeah, that'd be
7C.
7C. Okay.
Well, actually, no, it'd be D.
7D. Okay. Yeah, I'll call you back up then.
Okay.
Sorry. Daryl Wilson.
Thank you for your time. I live on Bryant Avenue. What I have not heard so far this evening is the reason the Nazarene Church is no longer the Nazarene Church now. And the reason the Nazarene Church is no longer the Nazarene Church is because of the homeless population. The Nazarene Church had a stated goal of reaching out and helping the homeless as their main goal as a church. In doing so, they drove away their congregation. There was a school that was run out of the Nazarene Church as well, Oak Park Christian School. Not affiliated with the church specifically, but utilizing their facility. It no longer exists there. It doesn't because of the homeless population that came in, drove the congregation away. They ended up supporting the church as the school until it could no longer be viable and operate and meet their expenses. So it closed. When it closed and the food was no longer there for the homeless to come and get, and the clothing was no longer there for them to come and get, they dispersed and left the area. But they were foot traffic of homeless 1 day a week when these services were offered, coming through the neighborhood. There were problems with that. There was theft, there was property damage, there was other drug paraphernalia that was discovered. There is a playground at that property for kids. I used to bring my kid down there. Found needles while they were doing that homeless helping program. It will cause problems. I work in Eugene. I work near Washington Jefferson, approximately halfway between the jail and the Eugene Mission. It is known as Felony Flats. When the city chose to allow the homeless to set up under Washington Jefferson in a fairly controlled environment, heavily patrolled, that area specifically seemed to be operating okay. It's been pointed out that it is now closed, and they are having to dig down 18 inches to decontaminate the property. The problem wasn't for the neighborhood, them specifically that were there. It was the outgrowth from it. Blocks and blocks and blocks of outgrowth from it, of tents being set up on the sidewalks, abandoned vehicles, RVs. Another example is the DMV location that was in West Eugene. That had to close down because of the homeless population that surrounded it. People could not get to the DMV to get services there without feeling threatened. Hundreds of abandoned vehicles, RVs, tents around it. They moved the facility because of that population. They were allowed to get a foothold in. Once they get a foothold in, they start coming in. I do not wish to see this happen to the neighborhood that I've invested in, that I raised my child in, and that I would like to bring my grandchild to and take to a neighborhood park or be able to go for a walk in the neighborhood. I carry a weapon when I work. I work in a facility that's very secure. We have barbed wire around the top of our fence at work. They try to break in anyway, even with that deterrent. Can you imagine an unprotected neighborhood? having to deal with it? That's all I have to say. Please reconsider. Thank you.
Ted, is it Days? Dawson?
Yeah, my name's Ted Dawson. I live on Bryant. Matter of fact, Kurt's my neighbor. And we moved in there in 2005. And I'm going to say probably the first 4 years was really rough. I know for a fact we had a drug dealer right off my backyard, some down the street on Bryant. And you couldn't leave anything out in your front yard or anything. My neighbor had left his garage open, went to the store, came back, half his working tools were gone. They stole my tires and wheels off my car 2 days before Thanksgiving. They were brand new. My neighbor had a couple of gas cans, he cut his grass. They were gone. Now we don't have that. And it's really changed. We've got a lot of families there. We've got a lot of kids going around. And as you see, a lot of these people live right in that neighborhood. Look, they're all coming out. They're supporting this thing. So that thing is kind of a bad idea. And like everybody else is saying, I don't want to sound like broken record. We all know it's not a good idea. But to emulate the Eugene mission, look where it's at. If you want to do that, then put it in a distro area, because that's where that one's at. It's not in somebody's backyard. So the other thing I have is, and I'm going to keep it short, is what happens if you guys do this 2, 3, maybe 4 years from now, the program doesn't work? Where's the funds going to be for that? Are they going to try to keep it going? I mean, you got your warming shelters over here, and I see in the Sentinel that you're always constantly looking for volunteers to do it, and they're hardly ever open. So what's going to happen with this homeless camp 4 or 5 years from now? Is this going to be overrun? Are we just going to say, the hell with it? Let them go? That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Ace Thayer?
Good day. I have a place on M Street, just down from there. And this is, I think, a terrible idea. We've seen it happen in Eugene and Seattle, San Francisco. It doesn't get any better. And I think this somehow is a spillover from Eugene, and maybe even somehow that people here are going to benefit because they're pushed down here and makes them look better. In Eugene, who's going to take responsibility when there is crime? Like, say, an old man like me is attacked, or my property is damaged. No one in the city council is going to care. They're not going to pay for my injuries or my property. I'm just going to have to tough it out. And then property values will fall if it's undesirable. Eventually, and we can already see high density starting in Cottage Grove. I think we've become an enclave of Eugene, and they're dictating to us what the right way should be. We should be enlightened because they have the intellectual prowess to know how to set up a community. And we're a little behind. We're kind of a hit community for them. And they want to regentrify, I think, this community. And eventually, maybe, they could decide that, yes, it was a bad idea, but now we could maybe get rid of this property. We want to live here, and we could rebuild into a nice, yuppie community for California retirees. So I always think there's maybe more behind things than just the simple caring about the homeless. I have homeless in my own family, brothers and sisters who were bums, same parents, same education, everything, but they chose to have self-indulgence. Sorry to say they're all dead now, because they lived a life of debauchery. But I don't see anything good coming out of this. And people who work hard in a community and have lived here and been loyal and paid their taxes should not be punished. Sometimes I get a little upset when they say the dandelions were over 11 inches and I better do something. I come after me. I'm held to a standard. But they're not going to be held to a standard. And that's all I have to say. I don't want to bother you with any more of my diatribe, but I had to say it. So thank you.
Thank you. Johanna Z., you had budget. Do you want to talk now, or do you got a specific item on? Okay.
Hi, Johanna Z., Cottonwood Place. I do just want to mention the homeless, if I could, real quick, how exciting this actually is to see so many people here And I know that it must seem like we're looping with all the same issues over and over. It's like a new location, all the same issues, different neighbors coming in and talking about. I think it's a really good thing as we learn to grow as a community. And thank you for the opportunity. Our group, which came out of this, Community Strong Cottage Grove, will be speaking on July 18th about something new, something exciting, something different than what we're doing. So we're looking forward to that. Talking to you today about the federally qualified health clinic that at first glance seems like a good thing. Who wouldn't want more services in the community? Who wouldn't want to help the underserved? You've heard great stories about how 4,000 people will be, using this clinic and providing access to those who may not otherwise get it. But if we look a little deeper, you'll see that it isn't just randomly placed next to the school. This is quite intentional. We've heard from the school district superintendent who makes strong innuendos stating that home life is not safe, but schools are. Trust the schools, not the parents. Oregon law permits 15-year-olds to access health care with no parental consent, 14 years old for mental health, and any age for reproductive services. That's ORS 109.610 and .640. And any practitioner, all they have to do is write that it's not in the best interest of the patient to disclose information to the parents. And we know in the schools that kids are being taught how to hide things from the parents. So just because these laws allow kids to access health care without parental consent, does this really mean that we should? Just because kids are going to smoke, should we put a vending machine in the lobby of a high school, giving them access? As I've mentioned, I've talked to several other counties and areas where their schools are, where these clinics are right next to the schools, and the teachers are encouraging students 13 years and older to send their kids over for services. So kids just want to fit in, right? They want to be popular. I continue to hear from students that if they do not identify as one of these so-called marginalized victim groups, that they are considered the oppressor and treated differently. So we don't trust the schools to do what's right by our kids. There's a reason over 300 kids were removed from the school system this past year. I encourage more of them to do so. There's plenty of alternatives out there, and we can even create more homeschool learning pods, freedom cells, unschooling co-ops. Now, 3 of you counselors have young children, I believe. How would you feel if, your kid decides one day to be a superhero and then want to be the opposite gender, right? So the trajectory that we're headed, because keep in mind, we just had the Menstrual Dignity Act, which means that we put tampon machines in the bathrooms of small young boys because somehow somebody decided that little boys can actually menstruate. And I can't quite figure that one out with over 30 years of medical experience. So anyway, one of the services that they can easily do is prescribe puberty blockers or other hormone therapies without parental, and this is huge because puberty blockers can cause permanent, irreversible damage to kids. Prefrontal cortex, this part of your brain, the decision making, is not even fully developed until kids are 25 years old. Well, they'll be adults by then, but I think, shouldn't we as parents be a part of that conversation? So this is not a family or community approach. Many people in this community don't have access to health care because we won't comply with these draconian measures of testing, social distancing, quarantining, or submitting to some medical experiment, and nobody's standing up for them. So how about all the partners in this project, right? Peace Health fired many employees for not complying in the name of public health. They closed a wing of the hospital because they can't find enough staff, and they're suffering financially. South Lane Mental Health has a waiting list. They don't have enough counselors. They don't have enough staff. How many were fired or took early retirement? They require masking and a jab to work there. So they're discriminating against potential employees, people in this community who want to work for these organizations but are told they can't. So why are we creating and supporting more infrastructure when they don't have the staff to take care of the current businesses? It just doesn't make sense. So we've started a local petition asking you not to support this project, not contribute $100,000 and publicly support it. I've got 45 signatures here, and the petition keeps going. We've started an online one, so it's going to be an ongoing. Anyone interested here can certainly do that. And I think I'm out of time. So,
Thanks.
thank you.
Brad Pennington.
sounding like a broken record. This is all stuff you've heard throughout the evening so far, but it's all very important, and I'm going to go through it again. So, about the homeless camp. I live on Bryant. My best friend lives on the other end. I could throw a tennis ball at his front door from my backyard. He has 2 awesome kids. They are my nephews. I mean, I love the crap out of them. I see them out there riding bikes with the other kids all the time. They're having a great time out there. Having a homeless camp 3 blocks from my front door is going to deter them from just being kids. And living in an era where everybody's online and everybody's playing video games and doing stupid things, going out and doing really dumb things and being kids, I mean, it's going to be taken away from them. Honestly, if I had small children, I would let them outside in fear of that. Nobody's going to be sitting there looking at their criminal backgrounds when people are going to move into this homeless camp. Are they going to be living inside the church? Are they going to be pets outside? Are they going to allow broken down vehicles there and park wherever they want? Who's going to go through that? Who's going to look at who they really are? Are they felons? Are they child rapists? Nobody knows. I haven't heard anybody even bring that up. So, I mean, there's the property value situation. That would hurt everybody. That's not even my biggest concern. Neighborhood safety and children it is something that needs to be brought up. Having a homeless camp there, in no way anybody that lives there. This is the first house I've ever bought. I'm proud of it. Is it a gem? No, but it's my castle. I'm proud of it, and I'm going to live there, and I'm going to defend the shit out of it. I do not believe that having any type of homeless camp whatsoever is going to make me feel safer when my wife's working at home, from home, and I'm gone. I'm a private contractor. I'm driving all the time. I can't be there to watch out. Who is? Are the police going to go through and patrol the area more? If so, who's going to fund that? Who's going to fund their overtime? Is anybody? Have you guys even brought that up? No. Personal property. I have a crap ton of money invested in this. If I lose it, it's going to be a pain in the ass for me to get back on my feet. Animal safety. Talking about pets. If they're allowed to have pets there, do they have the rabies shots? Are they going to be leashed? If I'm walking my dog, is my dog going to get attacked? And if so, who's going to pay the bill? Me? Or the people that let these people move in with 0 restraints whatsoever? What about the hygiene and the trash scenario? I've seen a lot of homeless camps. They're not exactly pristine. So, am I going to have to go walk out there and pick up garbage every day just in my neighborhood? For me and my neighbors, does it look like shit? Or is the city going to step up and do it? If so, who's going to pay for that? Our tax dollars? Are they already appropriated somewhere else? Is there extra money to dip into? If there is that much extra money, why can't we have it back and lower our taxes? Right. The street itself, potholes everywhere. There's other places money could be invested. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, I have a whole list. It's already been gone through. I don't even need the whole 5 minutes. I just need you guys to really think about what you're doing and who you're really hurting. Because it's the people that are sitting in this area right now. The people that are still at home. Maybe some dads and moms are here and the other parent is sitting at home watching the kids. They can't be here to show their face. But you know what? We are here standing up for that. And I would appreciate me having the thought brought up of having a homeless camp 6 blocks from a school where kids are going to be walking. I see kids walking from school to their homes on that road, passing that church. High schoolers too. Who's going to sit there and look out for them? Nobody. Because it's just going to be an open door policy to let these asshats come in and destroy the world.
Excuse me, enough language. No more. I understand folks are, I understand that folks are passionate, and we get that, but this is a city council meeting.
Just got one. Sorry. So anyways, those people that would not have the best interest for the actual people who are known as that, they have no place. I mean, the industrial park, there's a lot of open range over there. Put a building over. Do something over there. Not in a neighborhood where there's small children. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Okay, it brings us to item 5, public hearings. There is none. Item 6, consent agenda with the added item C.
Move approval.
Second. Have a motion with the second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 7, resolution and ordinances. Item A is resolution authorizing inter-fund loan for the industrial park fund. Ms. Likens?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The industrial park will receive funds from the sale of property if a prospective buyer completes the purchase. At this time, it is not anticipated to close prior to the end of the current fiscal year, which is June 30th, this Thursday. In anticipation of the proceeds from the sale not being received this fiscal year, it's prudent to authorize an interfund loan in the amount of $85,000 from the Storm Drain Reserve Fund to the Industrial Park Fund in order to avoid a cash flow. If the funds from the sale are received prior to the close of the current fiscal year, the loan will not be perfected. ORS 294.468 allows for the interfund transfer to be repaid in 1 year and based on its repayment schedule. The loan is anticipated to be a short-term loan with repayment occurring upon the receipt of the sale of the sale proceeds. The loan will bear 0% interest to its short time frame. It's staff's recommendation that the council adopt the resolution authorizing the interfund loan.
Resolution number?
2072.
Councilor Fleck?
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt resolution 2072.
Second. Have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Savage?
Aye.
Councilor Fleck?
Aye.
Councilor Stemmen?
Aye.
Councilor Irvin?
Aye.
Councilor Roberts?
Aye.
Councilor Solsby? Aye. Mayor Galley?
Aye. Resolution 2072 passes. Brings us to item D, resolution transferring appropriate funds with building inspection program. Ms. Likens.
ORS 294.450 allows the transfer of appropriations within a fund. It is necessary to move funds in the Building Inspection Program Fund and the Wastewater Fund, Wastewater Treatment Department. The resolution reduces the amount in contingency line items that correlate to the funds in the same amount. As with any reappropriation of funds, the net effect on the bottom line is 0. In the Building Inspection Program Fund, it's necessary to reappropriate money from the contingency line item to materials and services, school construction, excise tax line item in the amount of $63,000. Construction has exceeded our original estimates for the year, which increased the need for reappropriation to make payments to the school district. In the wastewater fund, water treatment department, it's necessary to reappropriate money from the contingency line item to materials and services, equipment maintenance and repair line item in the amount of $22,880. The treatment chemicals line item in the amount of $64,600, and the biosolid disposal line in the amount of $37,430. These increases are associated with unanticipated major repairs to equipment, increased costs for treatment chemicals and biosolid disposal associated with supply chain and transportation costs. The internal service department contingency line item will be reduced by $125,000 to offset the increase in expenditures. It's staff's recommendation that the council adopt the resolution to reappropriate funds within the Building Inspection Program Fund and the Wastewater Fund, Wastewater Treatment Department.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt resolution number 2073.
Second. Have a motion with the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Fleck?
Aye.
Councilor Stennett?
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts, Counselor Solsby. Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Resolution 2073 passes. Brings us to item C, resolution establishing appropriations within the general fund for expenditures and unforeseen specific purpose grants. Ms. Likens.
Mayor and Council. The city's received a specific purpose grant from the State of Oregon Department of Administrative Services known as the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, aimed at providing relief to government organizations dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and the total amount of $1,162,216 during fiscal year 21-22. It's been allocated as a resource to the general fund in the amount of $867,711, to the general reserve fund in the amount of $283,876, and to the special trust fund in the amount of $10,629. The grant was unknown at the time the original budget was adopted for fiscal year 21-22. The amount of the special trust fund is not appropriated as the grant funding is eligible to be used for stated purpose on or after March 3rd, 2021. Fundraising to support the Eugene Symphony community event did not occur as anticipated in the previous fiscal year, leaving a shortfall. The grant will be received in the special trust fund in order to cover that shortfall. In order to lawfully spend the money, the city must comply with the requirements of local budget law. Expenditures in the year of the receipt of the grant, gifts, bequests, or advices transferred to the local government and the trust for a specific purpose may be made after enactment of a resolution or ordinance authorizing the expenditures. It's ORS 294.338. It's staff's recommendation that the council adopt the resolution to establish the appropriations for the use of the grant funds for the purpose stated in the amount of $1,151,587 and recognition of grant receipts in a special trust fund in the amount of $10,629 for the total of the $1,162,216. The resolution outlines where specifically the funds would be attributed by line items. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the resolution, it states for the purposes stated, for the use of the funds. For the $970,826 in contingency, is contingency the purpose stated, or is it the purposes stated that previously in the charts of allocation?
This only has to do with the current fiscal year, nothing for next fiscal year. So the contingency is being increased, the $692,506, and will be carried forward to next fiscal year because it's not anticipated to be spent this fiscal year. So it's not been designated other than a contingency line item.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt resolution 2074.
Second.
Motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Richard, on this, I mean, the budget committee voted out the fund for the clinic, and it's back in here. How does that work that way? Does this?
No, you're not in the right resolution.
That's the next resolution.
Okay. And I digress.
And it's not in the next meeting.
And it's not in there.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Stennett,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Solsby. Aye. Counselor Savage.
Aye.
Counselor Fleck.
Aye.
Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Resolution 2074 passes. Brings us to item D, resolution adopting the 22-23 budget. Ms. Likens.
Thank you. The City of Cottage Grove Budget Committee has met and approved the 22-23 budget. A public hearing before the City Council was held on June 13th to receive additional comments. The new fiscal year begins July 1, 2022, and the city is required to adopt a budget for the new fiscal year no later than June 30th. At the budget hearing, changes to the approved budget were brought forward by staff and by the public. Staff is recommending changes to the general fund as follows. Increase the investigation expense line item in the police operations budget by $2,600. It's to acquire access to an online pawn lookup tool and to increase, excuse me, I lost my place, the fuel and lubricants expense line item by $32,000 to allow for increased fuel prices that we are now experiencing, which have changed dramatically since the budget was approved just 1 month ago. The fuel and lubricants line item in the development department to increase by $800 for the same reason. To establish a contractual services line item in the youth peer court department in the amount of $4,800, allowing for assessment services of youth who receive citations for offenses such as disorderly conduct, criminal mischief, harassment, vandalism, etc. These increases are proposed to be offset with a reduction to the contingency line item in the internal support department of the general fund. Recommended staff changes to the special trust fund are as follows. Create a skate park donation revenue line item in the amount of $5,000 and a correlating expense line item for the skate park in the amount of $5,000. This will allow for the collection of funds to pursue a plan to improve the skate park as well as accomplish the improvements. The $5,000 is a placeholder. If more funds are received, additional action by the council may be taken to appropriate the funds at that time. There is also in the special trust fund that I didn't include in this memo by omission was $100 that's been added to the revenue for unhoused needs with a corresponding expenditure to allow that to happen if more money is received through donations for that purpose. Recommended staff changes to the building inspection program fund are as follows. Increase the fuel and lubricant line item by $1,500 for the same reason as previously stated. The increase to be offset with a reduction to the contingency line item. Recommended staff changes to the street fund, street maintenance department and the street sweeping department as follows. Increase the fuel and lubricant line items by $15,500 and $15,000 respectively for the same reason as previously stated. The increase to be offset again with the reduction to the contingency line item in the internal support department. Recommended staff changes to the enterprise funds are as follows. Increase the fuel and lubricants line items in the water fund, water distribution department by $15,500. Wastewater fund, wastewater collection department by $7,600. And the Middlefield Golf Course department by $7,800. The increases to be offset with the reduction to contingency line in their respective internal support departments. Overall, the combined fuel and lubricant expenses are proposed to be increased a total of $95,700. It was misstated in the memo, and I think I mentioned that Friday morning. These increases were derived by using the amount of fuel used during the current fiscal year and estimating where the cost of fuel may rise to during the coming fiscal year. It's just an estimate, and hopefully we have estimated high and the expenditure will not be fully recognized. A resolution was presented to the council to authorize the interfund loan to the industrial park and the storm drain reserve fund in the event of those sale proceeds not being received this fiscal year. Staff is recommending the repayment of the loan, $85,000 be included in the industrial park fund for 22-23. Funding requests from the public were as follows. South Valley Farmers Market requested minor funding an amount of $5,000, allowing their program to provide benefits to low-income members of the community by increasing their staffing budget to allow for the enhancement of programs. Jim Gilroy, representing Be Your Best, requested the council consider supporting their efforts to have a community health clinic operated by Lane County Public Health in Cottage Grove. They requested funding in the amount of $100,000. This amount was included in the original proposed budget and reduced by the budget committee and placed in the contingency line item. After the budget hearing, the city manager received an additional funding request from the Singing Creek Educational Center to fund operation of 1 week of the 2-week Pueblos summer camp held at the snack house. The amount being requested is $1,868. The request was submitted by email on June 14th and is attached for your review. Additionally, the budget committee reduced funding for the operation support of a homeless facility in the amount of $200,000 in the general fund, community services department, as more consideration of the issue was needed. The amount was appropriated within the contingency line item, and further consideration may be appropriate at this time. The proposed resolution included in your packet does include the proposed changes outlined in this memo from staff, and those are highlighted in green on the budget document pages of the funds affected. No other changes were included. However, the corresponding line items that may be affected have been highlighted in pink to simplify any changes you determine appropriate at this time as to where they might be included for fiscal year 22-23. It's staff's recommendation that the council consider the changes that have been proposed by staff and requested by the public, make any changes as deemed appropriate, and then approve the resolution adopting the budget for 22-23, making appropriations and including categorizing ad valorem.
Steve Williamson.
Thank you. I'm Steve Williamson. Most of y'all know me as the Opal Whiteley guy around town. But I'm here tonight as president of the Singing Creek Educational Center, and we're applying for one of these summer grants to run 1 week of summer camps for Spanish language and Guatemalan language kids and their families. We did it last year. It was really popular, but we could only do it for 1 week because the COVID lockdown happened. And by the way, just a side thing, you guys have a really hard job. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that, but between COVID, homelessness, and everything else, you have a very hard job, and I really appreciate your work. If you have any questions, I'm here today, and you can get a hold of me or Karen Rainsaw, our executive director, by email. She couldn't be here tonight. But these camps, the camp that we've created in Spanish language Guatemalan is just like what we do for our regular camps, except it's focused more on them, their culture, their arts and crafts, food items. But we do living history, and I like to think that we do it better than almost anyone around within a good driving range. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to. And again, I really appreciate your work. And we would very much appreciate that grant of $1,800. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Irvin?
Oh, I got a question for you.
Steve?
Thank you, Steve. First of all, thank you for coming in and person here. Appreciate that. Can you, a couple of thoughts come to mind. What, is this open to anybody that would want to apply could receive it like a scholarship?
Yes.
Or is it specific to a particular group? And then if the camp doesn't happen for whatever reason, what would be the intended use of the funds?
Well, I'm pretty sure the camp's going to happen, but if it didn't happen, we would come back to the council and see, the city, and see if we could roll it over into other camp scholarships, or if the city would want the money back. But the first part of your question, these camps, because we have Spanish language and Guatemalan speaking language teachers. These camps would be primarily for kids from that culture. Although I'm sure any kid could apply, learn words in a new language, learn new things in a different language and culture. This one, the Pueblo camps, we set up last year, and we got lots of the Oregon Cultural Heritage Commission financed it, and we got lots of good feedback on it. So, yeah, but we can only do it for 1 week last year, and that's what we're applying to y'all for money for 1 more week. That answers your question, Councilor.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for him? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Fleck.
So I guess I'd like to begin by saying I have a conflict of interest with community sharing being a line item in the community promotions section of this budget. And if that item comes up for discussion, I will recuse myself from that item. That being said, going through the budget, it looks like we have a pretty straightforward, we have the budget that's adopted. I believe that we probably all can support the green items in here that staff are presenting with the fuel increases and whatnot. So then we're looking at the requests from the community for items to support. I would suggest that we leave the item for any potential shelter items off the table at this point. We can always move those monies out of contingency in the future. There's just no point in pulling them out at this point. So that brings us back to the South Valley Farmers Market. I will say on that one, I guess unfortunately I don't know enough about how this program is going to work to benefit folks in our community. It seems like an awful lot of money, which isn't necessarily, I don't know if it's allocated for clients. The folks who are selling at the market is for profit, and so I'm just not sure how I feel about this one. I'm not necessarily opposed, but I just don't know that I support this one. I think the summer camp I certainly can support, and I guess that brings us to the community health center. This has actually been a project that's been in the process for 10 years. Jim Gilroy, former mayor of this town, many other folks who have been involved in this community for years and years and years, Jackie Lester, have worked on this with Lane County for years. And I guess the only example I can tell you of how much we need health care in our community is that my mother, I was trying to get her moved here from Colorado. And that's a very tough prospect when my mom actually had a ton of money, but through years and years of assisted living, wiped out her savings completely and ended up on Medicaid. And unfortunately, at that point, if I wanted to move her here, I had to have a physician, and there are none in our town. This clinic certainly would have provided those services. We're talking about the price of fuel. Folks who need health care in this community certainly need items that they can, get without having to drive to the metro area. So I certainly support that item as well.
Councilor Soulsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to comment on the healthcare clinic. I do have concerns about this, and it's not because I don't believe that we need healthcare. It's that I have a lot of contacts with people that work in the healthcare community and in Cottage Grove, and what they are telling me is that it's not a lack of space, that it is a shortage of workers. And that Mike is right, Councilor Fleck is correct in the fact that there are no doctors. We cannot keep doctors in Cottage Grove. They do their residency and then they move on. We have 3 doctors that luckily have stayed. I am very close with a few home health care nurses, and they are telling me that at both Magnolia Gardens and the one over by Middlefield. It's Middlefield. That they have been shorthanded for years, and that one of the healthcare nurses had one of her patients and that can hardly stand, and that they had to wait outside for 15 minutes the other day just to have someone come and lock the door at Magnolia Gardens because they're so short-staffed. And I know that South Lane Mental Health, that the waiting list is enormous. I know Eugene, they're saying that when they go there, it's 6 to 9 months to get an appointment. I know that we let go of a lot of our nurses, doctors, administrators, because of the vaccine mandates. We brought in a lot of traveling nurses at a very high cost. And now, unfortunately, the hospitals are, what I'm hearing is that the hospitals cannot afford this any longer, and so they're eliminating contracts at that higher pay and reducing their pay lower than what we've ever seen. And so there is a mass exodus from our hospitals right now, and not just Cottage Grove, but Riverbend and so forth. They're really struggling right now when I talked to the head person from the healthcare clinic. I asked her, what do you think your biggest challenge would be? And she said staffing. And so I am afraid of opening another clinic and not being able to staff it. I don't think it's the facility necessarily that we need. I think it's the staff. I know that Riverbend just closed 50 more beds because it's imploding. They have nurses leaving left and right. They cannot staff it. This happened to me personally 8 years ago. I was in the emergency room because they did not have a bed for me, which I stayed there for 3 or 4 days. I can't remember. And then one after another doctor came in and talked to me and asked me to go to the press because they were so upset about the staffing issues there, because it wasn't just me. There was couple dozen people in hallways, in the emergency room, with curtains in between us. This is a serious problem, and I think we need to up our staffing before we open more clinics. I know this clinic is going to happen. I do have concerns about being fiscally responsible for the city of Cottage Grove when our fuel costs are up $95,000. And now we're being asked to give $100,000 of our funds. And so that is very concerning to me. I worry about what other expenses the city is going to have that are unforeseen. You know, I know what it's costing us to put a new roof on our community center. These prices are astronomical. I do not know if we can truly afford this. So, you know, whether you support this or not, I just don't know if we can afford to give $100,000 of the city of Cottage Grove's money at this time.
Council Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to apologize for being an agenda step higher than I was. I'm going through one of my kidney problems that I get from my cancer byproduct here. So my medicine is sort of kicking me in. 2 items for me on this is the 100,000. I had a great lunch with Alicia Beimer a few days ago, and I talked to our mayor too. From what I understand, this health clinic is going to happen no matter whether we support it or not. Is what I'm sort of hearing. So I sort of agree with Candace. We pulled the money out during the budget meeting, and I think it's going to happen whether we give them 100,000 or not. And I'd rather see that 100,000 go to other things than that. Not, that's just me. Also, the farmers market. I really support this, but I really agree with Mike on this. 5,000 just seems like a lot of money. I'm friends with a lot of those people. That market really hasn't grown much. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really support what they're doing, and I just don't understand what they're going to do with $5,000. I'm a little bit tight on that. And then where's the checks and balances on stuff like this? Last year, didn't we get $5,000 to a community garden? Did that even ever happen? It did?
Pretty sure it did.
They're in the process of doing it still. Yeah.
Okay. So, I could maybe do a reduced amount on this farmers market. But I definitely don't like the 100,000 for the. I think that they'll get the money. I don't think we need to. That's all I have.
Any others? Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much. I support the community center, and part of the reason that I do, we have had a family doctor up at OHSU in Portland for 13 and a half years, and she retired last year. We've commuted up to Portland for any of our medical needs because she's phenomenal, because she's amazing, because I have her cell phone number, because that's the relationship that you should build with your physician. It was really heartbreaking to leave, but there was excitement within me knowing that we were coming to Cottage Grove, and my gosh, I didn't have to spend 2.5 hours driving to Portland just to have a doctor's appointment. We immediately got signed on with a local physician whom we equally adore and really appreciate. She's phenomenal. And I thought everything was golden, and it really is golden. I have a son with a disability, and he has paperwork with the disability, with DDS, Developmental Disability Services, and there is very specific paperwork that needs to be signed by his primary care physician, not by a partner, not by a nurse, but by his physician. And I called with 2.5 months notice. Hey, I just need to come in. We need to get a little signature on this page. What are we looking at? This is due by the end of June. That appointment that I made isn't until the middle of August. So 3.5 months for a typical physician's appointment for signature. I would love to see a community health center open so that people don't have to travel. I would love to see more opportunities. I did medical classes for my own personal career through something similar, and the fact that there's going to be an educational component where folks can get a higher education, I think that's phenomenal. So I support it.
Councilor Stanton.
Yeah, I should begin. I believe I did, as the program administrator, downtown Cottage Grove, I should declare a potential conflict of interest with regard to the line item supporting the Main Street program. Beyond that, I was unable to attend the budget hearing or meeting due to illness. Dismayed that the community health clinic was removed from the budget and placed in the contingency. The need seems obvious to me and growing. Our support means a lot more than the money we would contribute. It would help the supporters of this clinic leverage city support for further funding. Seems pretty straightforward and obvious to me. I don't think the fact that it's going to happen anyway is in any way should deter us from supporting it as a city. I think our funds mean more than a lot of other avenues it could come from. I support the farmers market. I think it's unfortunate that they spoke last meeting instead of this one with regard to their plans for the funds, and I certainly support the camp at the Singing Creek Center. So,
Councilor Irvin. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the camp for the Singing Creek and excited to have more engagement with those that are in this community about the history here. I think it goes to promote who we are and the culture that we have, and so I support that. The community market, I guess I don't know exactly how the money would be used in practice and what the benefits would yield. I'm in support of it in the general sense that I think that the more that we can do to promote local foods, local growing, building a market that doesn't rely on as much trucking and expands hopefully the land use of food production locally, anything towards that effort within reason, I'm in support of. So I would certainly hope that the money gets put to great use and moves towards those efforts. As far as the community health center, I think I was the one that moved that to a contingency item, and just because there's more information that I wish to have before I could support it. I've to date found a bit of conflicting information in the times that I've been discussing this with folks that are involved in it. That leaves me a little unsettled, and so I have feelers out for additional information about questions that concern me. There is a route in my mind to support it. I just have to have those questions ease my conscience, or answered, in a way that would, and so I would be comfortable with keeping it as a contingency item and bringing it up at a future meeting. A couple key points. My understanding, if I'm not misrepresenting, is that the funding is all but secured with some of the donors that they have. Speaking to Mrs. Lester, and so that is encouraging. I understand that there's a model or of having community support or local support as a requirement, and I'd love to get there if I can, but I just can't right now in good conscience. So I would hope that we could visit that one in the future, because I was torn thinking about, I don't want to vote no on a budget because of a thing that we don't have to do that for. So that's where I'm at with it.
Councilor Fleck? What's that?
Were you going to?
I was just going to say I'm okay with that if someone wanted to make a motion for it.
So I was actually, I heard two with the health center that were more concerned about the funding. I was actually going to offer a compromise on that, but I guess and I'm okay waiting as well. I know that they have a matching grant. I believe it was from Ford Family Foundation. And so, the challenge for them as we wait is, they're trying to, hit that number. And if they have, I'd love to show support. So, I'm certainly happy to compromise on the amount, because I think the support is more important than the amount, for sure. And I do I personally, I'm fine waiting. The challenge for them, though, is their fundraising, and they're trying to, come up with that target. Like you said, I think they're going to hit it regardless, but I guess my preference would be to lower the amount, but if the rule of the council is just to, wait and come back to that, I could do that. I was going to suggest the same thing on the farmer's market, maybe offer 2,500 instead of 5,000 as a compromise.
Someone make a motion then.
I take a swing
at it. Councilor, you're going to do it?
So I'll take a swing at it. I move that we adopt the budget as stated.
It's resolution 2075.
I move that we adopt resolution 2075, keeping the community health center in contingency, and reducing the farmers market allocation to 3.
But you're not going to reduce it because it's not in there, so you'd have to say.
Add 3,000 for the farmers market, and leave everything else as is.
Singing tree camp.
And add the singing tree amount of 1,868. 168.
And then the proposed changes by the city,
as well as including the proposed changes made by the city.
And the rounding would be to $1,870, just because I like zeros and fives.
For the singing tree, so yes, $1,870.
Thank you.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion with a second. Is there any more discussion?
Yes, a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we were at the budget committee, there was a motion by Mr. Meriday to add $10,000. What was that for? I'm trying to recall off the top of my head.
It was for Looking Glass for their project, so they also have a matching grant to come work on the building here on Whitaker.
Is that in what we've just discussed? So is that laying in contingency somewhere?
That was never in the budget.
That was just a suggestion that was never adopted.
That was his suggestion. We did have it in, we had 15,000 that we actually gave them in
the year before.
So to start their project, so we put money in to get them started on that as well. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And it's a great project, the Looking Glass program. Yeah.
Councilor,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is there money in a contingency? We could maybe look at that in the future, or for this budget year, or would this be, that would be pretty much it till next year?
No, well, you've got it in the line, you've got a line item for it, you've got contingency funds. Yeah, you can look at it during the year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So any more discussion? I guess,
I don't know if it needs to be a motion or something, but it would be nice to to have that brought back as an item to look at. So it just disappears if we don't make it official, but just at the time that it was proposed, having a context to understand what it would be going to, so if we can revisit that, it would be fantastic.
Is that the health clinic we're talking
No,
about?
Looking Glass.
Oh,
Okay, any more? Councilor Stennis?
So what is the procedure for making sure that we follow up on this? I would like to revisit the health center as soon as possible. No?
I would suggest that's a Councilor Urban question on timing.
If we could add it, if we could get the information back by the next meeting, is that the 18th?
The 11th?
The 11th. I'd be willing to entertain that on the 11th.
Can we ensure that happens? I have to see if all there is.
Can I amend the motion that it also, visit the community health clinic on the 11th?
What?
On the budget?
Or do we just add that as a second?
Just take it up as a new topic at the next.
Yeah, we didn't need a motion for it. We'll just make a note and put it on the agenda.
Yep. Okay, any more discussion on the budget? Seeing none, recorder, please call the roll.
Counselor Roberts?
Aye.
Counselor Solzy?
Aye.
Counselor Savage?
Aye.
Counselor Fleck?
Aye.
Counselor Stennett?
Aye.
Counselor Urban?
Aye.
Mayor Gowling?
Aye. Okay, resolution 2075 passes, brings us to item E, resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council. On April 12th, 2020, the City Council adopted Resolution 2043, adopting the City of Cottage Grove's 5-year utility rate financial plan proposed by the FCS Group starting in 2021-22 through 2025-26. The utility rate increases contained in the approved 2023-22-23 budget, which you just adopted, were prepared in accordance with the adopted 5-year utility rate financial plan. The attached resolution amends a comprehensive fee schedule to establish the rates for the city's utility systems. The monthly water and storm drainage rates will remain unchanged, and the monthly wastewater rates are increased by 12%, reflecting the adopted 5-year utility rate financial plan. The recommendation to council is to adopt the resolution amending the comprehensive fee schedule.
And we're 2076, correct? Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt resolution 2076.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Solzy?
Aye.
Counselor Savage?
Aye.
Counselor Fleck?
Aye.
Counselor Stennett?
Aye.
Counselor Urban?
Aye.
Counselor Roberts?
Aye.
Mayor Gowling?
Aye. Resolution 2076 passes, brings us to item 8, business from the City Council. Item A, overnight camping program. Mr. Myers.
So you have a discussion draft regarding chapter 8.40 that would be a new chapter in our city code regarding an overnight camping program, the implementation, basically implementing ORS 195.520, which allows a city to create an overnight camping provision for individuals and families that are living in vehicles that are homeless and living in vehicles. And so you have this proposed overnight camping program. It is kind of a mix of several of the programs that are around that have tried to implement this. There are some corrections that I need to point out for you. We tried to go a little farther than what the attorney wanted us to go. We defined shelter in there. The attorneys don't think we can go that far. Tents we can do as a part of a vehicle, but we can't go into any kind of other structure because ORS specifically limits it to living in a vehicle. And so we need to pull that piece out and just leave it as vehicles, and which could include tents. This would set up an opportunity for private property owners, businesses, nonprofits, individuals to be able to allow camping on their property. Businesses could do it in their parking lots with up to 2 facilities, 2 families or 2 facilities of 1 person or that group. We do have a question about the definition of family, how broad you want to go on that in the bottom of B. A single family residence could have a single campsite on their property, either as an RV vehicle, camper in the driveway, or a tent as a vehicle in the backyard. We've tried to define the backyard. Nowhere in our code is backyard defined. And so we tried to set that up in this, saying that it would be, it can't be between the structure on the property and an adjacent road, to try to make sure that it's behind an existing structure to be in the backyard if it's that. And then it does also allow somebody to have it on a piece of property if it is on a gravel lot or a paved lot. You can have campers there as well. This is an agreement, or is an authorization for a property owner to do it. And so we wouldn't be dealing with anything associated with those that are on the site. It would just be dealing with the property owner. The property owner would be managing and taking care of the site. If there was a problem, we would address it with the property owner. There is a revocation, there's a prohibition on getting compensation. This is for homeless individuals. It is not a way for property owners to charge rent or get services in lieu of being there. But it does have the parameters to have the property owner say, hey, if you're living here, you've got to take care of the site. You have to keep it clean. But they can't have them painting the house or doing anything else that is of value. What happens there is we have some pretty strict and short timelines on revocation or on getting sites cleaned up or removed if there's a problem. If they create that relationship, they start getting into a landlord-tenant situation, and then you've got a lot longer duration involved in trying to take care of an issue or a problem on the site. With the revocation, it can be revoked with 24 hours notice. If there's a problem, we can tell the property owner, hey, you've got 24 hours to notify the person on the property that they have to be off in 24 hours from that notice. And then there'd also be a penalty clause associated with it as well, probably about $100 a day for violations. So that's it in a really quick nutshell. There's a lot of discussion associated with how to set this up and run it. But this is an opportunity for individuals or businesses to take part and help relieve some of the pressure associated with those living in vehicles in the community.
Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple thoughts come to mind. Conestoga huts, I'm guessing those would be about in the same category as the pallet shelter. And we
now, if they build them on a trailer, then they'd be a vehicle.
Then the next thing that comes to mind are big Alaskan hunting tents. What are the, that can be quite large and communal? Is that going to be permissible? Do we have height restrictions that come into place? Some have fireplaces in them. What about when you do, maybe I do one at a time.
You could put a restriction on the size, or I don't know if you'd want to go so far as type, because you'd have to start getting into definitions of the type of materials and everything. But you definitely could set some size limitations. I don't see anything wrong with doing that. In fact, that'd be quite reasonable to put in there, as long as you're not saying that they have to be a pup tent, single person size, but no bigger than a 10 by 10 tent or something, set some parameter that would establish that.
I guess the concern there is I would think that even a tiny home on a trailer would meet this standard because it's vehicle or motorhome. Some of those also can be quite large, so restricting a large motorhome wouldn't really be the intended purpose either.
Right, and I'd tie it just to tents, not to the vehicles. Yeah. You do have the challenge associated with some tents are attached to vehicles, and that's a potential as well. So how would you create that size with a vehicle and a tent? That'd be a question. Or a tent trailer.
Yeah, because the other consideration, I may continue on this thought process, is there are some quote unquote shelters around this town that certainly aren't part of the primary structure, but are pretty dilapidated as well. And so I wonder where where that falls in, if that would be precluded from this kind of purpose, or if that would fall into a home housing standard. So I'm not sure if we are creating complications here with that regard.
This is only for vehicles. So, and the vehicles would be one of those items, and the tents would be included in the vehicles. So if they have a garden shed, or if they have a rundown almost ADU on the property, that would not be included in this. Now, maybe they have a rundown RV on the property in the backyard, stuck behind the garage. Yeah, that could be something through the application process. You know, what are some basic criteria that you want to have in an RV? Mind you, individuals that are going to be moving around in their RVs, still living in their own, may not have the smoke alarm or the fire extinguisher or any of those features as well. So if you create it, then we're moving to an inspection process of structures.
Councilor Fleck.
So as I'm reading in the 060 to revoke, it's listing incompatible uses of adjacent properties or constitutes a nuisance or other threat to public welfare. So what if it's noise or smoke or other sorts of things that are, creating conflict with the neighbors?
And if those, because when we reference the nuisance there, it's referencing our nuisances in our code. So any of those things that would be in our code, whether it's noise, accumulation of debris, any of those would match into that, and we'd use those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of limiting the tent size. We do have the setbacks as well, which I think is a good first step.
And Friday, I believe, Councilor Urban, did you bring up duration too? How long on the property? And that's a possible item as well. How long do you want the authorization for the property owner to be, and do they need to reapply after a year, or do, those kind of things could be in there too. That's currently not in here.
And I like that.
Can we put 200 square feet on the tents? Because that's what you can build your shed without a permit.
That's probably a good thing to think.
And it's a 10 by 20, one of those car canvas covers is 10 by 20, so.
Okay.
Councilor Soulsby, then Councilor Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to reiterate, it's one family, correct? And
in the tent on a single family.
And
it can be two on a public, private, nonprofit or business lot.
Okay. Yeah. And then also must be in backyard, not in.
On the single family.
Yes. Okay.
I thought we also had driveway if it was a motorhome.
And it could be, if it's a vehicle, excluding tents, it can be in the driveway.
And only to what size?
And it has to be in the driveway. It can't hang over the sidewalk. And so if they have a 20-foot driveway and somebody comes and wants to pull in a 40-foot fifth wheel, no, that won't, because it can't hang over the sidewalk. That's not their property.
I'm sorry. And also, and so for you to start the process for eviction, would that be on neighborhood complaints and?
Yeah, neighborhood complaints, or if we see something that's not appropriate, or we're getting something from the police department that something's going on, that would be the trigger that would activate the revocation.
Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. For a single family home to create this application, or for a business or nonprofit to create this application, is there a cost for this application?
No.
It's just meeting the parameters,
right,
and making the formal documentation?
Yeah, and we weren't thinking of any cost. I mean, that's something you still can do. I mean, there could be a fee associated with the application for authorization. But I mean, we want to try to encourage participation.
Agreed, which is why I'm asking. Thank you.
Councilor Stinnett?
I just kind of wondered maybe just wondering out loud how we would enforce definition of family and the number of people. And, I mean, would that be complaint driven too? How on earth are we going to decide who's related to us and put a number to that?
Yeah, we tossed around, do we want a hard number in there that a family can't be more than a certain size? I mean, you could. You could tie it to what they're living in, but I mean, these could be families that have 5 people living in a minivan. So where do you go? The other piece we were thinking, in the way the definition is written, we tried to broaden it in case there was a grandmother or, some kind of a part of the family was there as well, that it didn't just say 2 parents or 2 adults and children. What if one of the children's 19 or turns 19 while they're there? Do they get kicked out? And how do you?
Can we just?
Sorry.
I just wonder if we could just let that go and just kind of see how it plays out, and if it's a problem, bring it back and talk about it, because I think it's a difficult thing to try to decide, because you don't know every scenario that would come up.
Yeah. Well, it would seem like we were going to limit the size of the tent or the structure, then we would almost be working in concert with limiting the number of people too. So.
And, will that self-limit it as well, just the size of the tent?
I'd imagine.
One of the things that we anticipate with the application is when a property owner comes in, and we haven't put the application together because we were waiting to see how the ordinance would look, but one of the things that we'd ask for, they can't apply for this without having somebody in mind that's going to be there. So when they apply, they'll be applying and saying, we're going to have this family of this, how many, and they'll be living in a tent, or they'll be living in a fifth wheel. So we see the vehicle on the application, so we know it'll fit in the driveway and that kind of stuff. So we're not approving and authorizing without knowing that they're actually going to fit.
Understand it.
It would seem like we'd need to make the public aware that that's a possibility, and make sure that it gets out in as broad a way as possible.
Yeah.
So we got a motion on this?
But we don't need a motion.
Oh, okay.
So we'll add a duration of 1 year for the authorization that they have to renew that, and limit the tent size to 200 square feet as well. And anything else that you saw that needed to be changed, you let me know.
Mr. Myers, I assume that this would not authorize hooking up to the septic or to the water. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
They can't hook up the water, sewer, but the property owner does need to provide those services, toilet, sanitary services, as a part of being there. Yeah. Now, if somebody's in a fifth wheel or a motorhome and it's self-contained, they can use the facilities there, but then they're going to have to move off and dump it and come back again, which is allowed. I mean, if they're in the driveway.
No Cousin Eddie's, huh?
No Cousin Eddie's in the corn drain.
We should spell that out.
That does big.
Put it in the ordinance, no Cousin Eddie's.
No hooking to the sanitary system.
Mr. Mayor, does that mean you can't have a water hookup to a camper, like a hose?
Oh, the concern would be is if you got a water hookup to it, where would you be disposing your waste potentially?
The other challenge would be backflow devices. If you're hooking up with a hose, then we'd need to have that as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of places do.
Now, could they fill their tank? Because they're not hooking up, they could fill their tank on the trailer or motorhome and then not leave the hose connected.
That would be permissible under this? Because that seems pretty nuanced of you can hook it up to fill your tank, but you can't.
I don't see us going to this level of detail.
Yeah, and that's up to the property owner because it's their water.
But is it specifically prohibited in this?
No, it's not.
Counselor Savage.
Thank you so much. Is there one more point of clarification where X amount of complaints or calls to emergency services warrants a revisit of the application? You know, if there's 5 complaints a week from local neighbors, we're obviously going to be revisiting, or is that just kind of?
We thought about a number, but then it could be really bad, and it's one. So we didn't.
Acuity.
Yeah. So we didn't think that we wanted to put a number in. We'd be looking at, here's an ordinance that was violated, here's the severity of what it was. Take care of it immediately, and if they don't, they're out and it's done. Or yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Anything else? Okay, item B is electric scooters.
The city's received a request from Bird Rides, Inc. It's a stand-up electric scooter company. They were at the League of Oregon Cities conference held last month or the month before last in April. And they're working with a number of communities around the state, including small communities like Cottage Grove, and placing electric stand-up scooters in the communities for tourists and for residents to use to get about. And you have material here from e-scooters, kind of their overview of who they are and what they do and some of the specifics associated with them. And there's several approaches, and they've given us their MOU, and that's included right after their overview. And if you read that MOU, you probably recognize that it's pretty bird friendly, not in the things with flappy wings, but Bird as in the company that runs their scooters. Our attorney has provided some other samples of what could be a different type of an MOU or an agreement. You have an agreement from Albany, and I think Albany kind of took the Bird example, and then an ordinance example from the city of Monmouth. And you also have behind that an example of the agreement and the ordinance that our attorneys kind of put together to strengthen it a little bit better. One of the benefits of the ordinance is that we can adopt an ordinance and then it applies to any electric scooter company that decides to come in and hold the rentals for scooters in the community. And we're not looking at another agreement with another scooter company. It also, I mean, there's some provisions associated with riding the scooters included in the ordinance that if perchance somebody happens to buy their own electric scooter and decides to tootle around town on their own electric scooter, some of the regulations in the ordinance would then also apply to them as well, based on their operations and how to operate safely and stuff. So from that standpoint, our attorneys are kind of recommending the ordinance and the adopted standards. They also say there's a hybrid you could do with an agreement and then do the administrative standards on with the agreement if you wanted as well. So our question for the council tonight is, where do you want to go? Where do you want to hop on the scooter and ride to? Do you want to do an MOU? Do you want to do an ordinance? Do you want to do any of that? What approach do you want to take with us as we sit down and start ironing out something with electric scooters?
If we do, I think it should be a blanket for all, because just in case, and I seen a kid the other day on one of those single wheel straddle thing going across the crosswalk in front of me. So we got him in town already. Councilor Savage, I guess, first.
Thank you so much. I have talked with Bird, and I would like to declare a potential conflict. My employer has been sought out as a potential partner with them. We have not agreed on anything, and I don't foresee us doing this, but if this were to come to fruition, this could be a potential conflict.
Councilor Irvin?
Yeah, I'm in general support. I think I remember hearing a lot of the concerns ahead of this, and one of the first places I went was Tacoma, where they actually had them just laying around, and it was pretty surprising. There was a lot of them laying around, so I don't know how their management crew was handling things. A lot more places. It certainly is a concern in terms of things being ditched. I know that some of the technologies, keep charging, but that doesn't, I mean, come on. Those things are going to get ghosted into lakes and different things like that. So there's going to be issues. Is it worth it to have this type of transportation? I'm leaning towards yes, because they are gaining in popularity. Those one wheels are big in a lot of circles, off-road scooters around. And I give just the experience of back in DC. I think I went 32 miles from 100% charge on one of the line ones down to 10%. And, that can get you a lot of places in a day. That opens up opportunities for tourists and opportunities are generally good things. Of course, there's always problems as well, but I'm in general support. I think we got to be careful, and really, if we're going to allow it, I think by ordinance would be good. And really scrutinize the criteria around the cleanup, the reorganization.
And one of the things that's nice about the ordinance too is as we work through this in a year or 2 years, we start seeing some kind of situation, we can adjust the ordinance as well. And an agreement we may have a little more difficulty in doing.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Richard, is it possible to do it just like a trial run? I mean, do we have to guarantee you get so many of these?
Oh, we're not dealing with the scooter company at all. So this is just setting it up to where we have a way to kind of monitor and regulate what's happening. We can go so far as setting up a license fee and having a license requirement as well, or we could even have a per mile or per minute or whatever their charge is, a percent of that go to pay for bike paths or pay for parks or do something too. So this is setting up to be able to monitor, regulate, and control what's going on with them so that they're not like Baltimore. I've seen them in Baltimore. I've seen them in other college towns where they're just all over the place. To have some ability to manage what's going on.
So we would need a third party to.
Yeah, it's completely third party. We won't spend any
What I'm
time.
saying is if we found that third party, could we just do a test run with only so many to see how well it goes? Or do we have to get 100 of them or something?
Oh, we won't deal with the number at all.
No, I don't mean us, them.
Yeah, they'll deal with the number. So they'll start with 50 or 100, and I think that's what they're doing. And
What they wanted from the city is approval to come into town. They will find the entrepreneur that will manage these. It's a fleet manager that would take care of them. So the city has nothing to do other than saying we allow the scooters to operate within our city limits.
I'm aware of that, but I'm just wondering if.
That's between them and the fleet manager. Councilor Fleck.
So I do also agree with the ordinance, for sure, because as Councilor Irvin and others have mentioned, it's not whether we'll have troubles, it's how many and how much. And I think that if we had a really good vendor keeping after this, it should be mitigated dramatically. But there are some questions in this as we're looking at it. Licenses are valid for X period of time. I do think there should be a fee. I think it should be nominal, but enough to cover any sort of compliance and or processing. I am not interested in making any revenue on it. I don't think that's our role here.
the license portion can even come out too. And so do you even want a license? And that's a question. This council has removed a lot of licenses over the last couple of years. Do you really want to do a license on this as well?
Are you talking about the individual scooters or the company?
The company, yeah.
We just did away with taxi cabs.
Taxi cabs, secondhand stores. We did another one a while back, yeah. So.
But do we want to limit the number? That is another question here. And I'm actually tempted to say yes for now. It's like you said, it's something we can always revisit.
Mm-hmm.
I think the customer base will dictate the numbers. It's like how many auto parts stores, how many can stay in business. So, Councilor Solsby.
Okay, thank you. I actually do think there should be a fee, not necessarily licensing, but like any business, if I have a business, I have to go rent a space where this company, this kind of business is going to be using public land to house their scooters. So I think there actually should be some sort of a fee for that. And I like the idea of going back to our bike paths or for landscaping around our bike paths or something like that. I think that's a good use of the funds.
Councilor Stinnett.
They're going to store these in public land.
I would suggest that, this could be something once the ordinance is actually drafted and we bring the actual ordinance. But, because it's going to have to come back. We're not even close. This is still this discussion draft here.
I definitely support it in general. I think the opportunities in a town of this size and scope and layout, you can have quite a day in Cottage over one of these. It'd be fantastic. So, I think in applications like maybe somebody that flew in the airport, I know we have a rental car or a loan car, but these could work in place of that if it's tied up or something like that too. There are many opportunities.
Councilor Irvin.
Would there be carryover for e-bikes? I know I was thinking about Arcimoto before and those, but as far as e-bike rentals and stuff, would probably want to draft an ordinance that would anticipate that as well, right?
And part of this ordinance takes care of how they're to be operated, and we already have a bicycle ordinance that actually touches on scooters a little bit in that as well. And we'd have to look at what state law does. I think state law put in e-bikes as a bike and classifies them as the same as bikes, unless the size of the motor and power goes up a bit.
So this ordinance is specifically more about companies running scooter rentals.
Yeah. But, okay, if we have a company that's doing rental bikes or rental e-bikes or, does that fall under something that we'd want to do similar to this? That'd be a question. Arcimoto, if you have them coming in, they're going to be a little bigger, that they're not going to be on sidewalks or bike paths.
Yeah, they're street legal.
They're street legal. They're going to be in the roads. It'd be like a car rental company.
Councilor Fleck.
Do we want to add something about well-maintained? I could just see if a muffler was off of one of them and it's putting around town, driving everybody crazy.
It's electric.
Oh, it's electric.
You can put a muffler on, but it's not going to do anything.
Well, I still think that maintained.
Yeah.
Somebody gets halfway to the lake and it breaks down on them. I guess that's part of the vendor's problem. I don't know. That was just an open thought.
If you go back to our old taxi cab ordinance and the experience the city of Eugene had many, many years ago, even before we fixed our ordinance, and a lot of cities fixed their ordinances, we were licensing vehicles and requiring the taxi cabs to have safe brakes and tires and stuff like that. City of Eugene had the same thing. They had an accident. Lawyers proved, or at least created a suspicion that the vehicle was unsafe. Hence, then the city was on the hook for the liability or the accident that occurred as well. So getting into monitoring the safety of the vehicles, we should leave that to them, and it's on their responsibility. Because we pretty much have, and we include in here in the ordinance, that they have to indemnify us. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, concerns from council.
The EDA grant?
Oh, sorry. I didn't write it on that one. Item 8C, the request from Economic Development Administration for Cottage Grove co-applicant with Bohemia Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if council remembers, back on October 11th, 2022, City Council approved resolution 2056 authorizing support for an Economic Development Administration, commonly expressed as EDA, competitive tourism grant application for development of the north end of Bohemia Park. This morning, I received a notice of further consideration from the EDA asking for additional information and changes to the application. In Resolution 2056, Council approved providing in-kind matching funds, staffing support, utility fees, and permit fees. In the letter, EDA explained that in-kind matching is generally not allowed on EDA construction projects as a matter of policy. The City of Cottage Grove appears to be proposing certain construction services as in-kind match, including surveying the property, site clearing, installation of water services. The city could be added as a co-applicant and request EDA permission for force account work for the construction services, which would enable the services to potentially be counted as match. So this evening before you, the recommendation is that council approve by motion to be a co-applicant with the Bohemia Foundation, allowing the city's in-kind contributions to be potentially counted as match to the EDA grant. And as far as the cost, no additional costs would be occurred except those that have previously been approved in Resolution 2056. And I just share that this is cautiously optimistic news. We made it through another step in the EDA approval process, so further consideration is exciting. I would also share that 2 weeks ago we received the same letter for the Main Street grant, so both of our EDA grants are being seriously considered for approval.
And they did have a 2-week ask to get this back to them so they could make that final consideration. So that's why we put it on as an item to add to the agenda. So,
Councilor Flood.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve to be a co-applicant with Bohemia Foundation following the city's, allowing the city's in-kind contributions to potentially be counted as a match to the EDA grant.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Urban?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stewart, would you repaint the picture of the project or the intended outcome of the use of the grant?
Yeah, so the front portion of the park, which is the north corner, it's kind of triangular shape. It doesn't quite come to a point at the intersection of Main and 10th Street, but that north portion there would be redeveloped as the conceptual plan was drawn up about 15 years ago, actually. It would include a historical component that would capture the history of 5 different themes in the community that made Cottage Grove and South Willamette Valley how we got established here. It would include a replica steam or a water tank that was used in steam railroad engines. That would be, the replica would be incorporated into a water feature that kids could play in. It would be combined with a splash pad. There was programmed and interactive water features in the original design, so this goes a little further. Benches, hardscape that could be used for setting up booths and various different things to serve the community's various organizations. Program in a swing set, some additional playground equipment towards the front.
Councilor Roberts?
Mr. Mayor. So if we get this, would that help possibly get us the Main Street grant too? Richard, would that help?
This grant and the Main Street grant, I think one of the things that has made it attractive and for the further consideration is the fact that it's going to be revitalization of Main Street in a grander scale.
Right.
So I don't think it hurts, but I think it is adding some benefit. And you'll see, I just pulled up, this is from the October council meeting with the resolution. So this would be the splash pad area, and you have the little artwork depicting the various history of the community. So we can make it a little bigger, but I don't get it out of there. That was a little big. So this is Main Street here, 10th Street. So this would be the portion of the park that would be under that grant construction, and this is where that round flower bed area is and everything.
Where we had last year's Christmas tree that was lighted for the Santa.
Thank you.
So we got a question on the table. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Concerns from council? None? That's Councilor Urban?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The thought, or somebody mentioned it, Kyle in Veneta, when talking about the skate park, had mentioned considering the creation of a parks department, a taxing entity that could amass funds for parks. So, knowing very little about these kind of things, I was interested and wondered what ramifications, what kind of constraints there are in doing that, how that might benefit a community this size, and I guess I'd be interested in hearing more things pro or against.
And we currently have a park department. So what he's talking about is a special district, a park district like Willamette Lane, or I'm not sure what others there are, but that's the big one that's in the area. And what you're doing there is you're creating another taxing entity with its own board of directors, as well as then creating a tax base that then will hit compression in the community, and you'll reduce compression, reduce taxes for everything from the fire district, city, and those non-school governmental agencies.
That's another way of saying sharing the tax base.
Yeah. Currently, we, the Parks Department's with the city. We have been talking and working with, and one of the reasons we have South Valley Athletics in the community center is trying to work and create, short of creating a district, but creating the opportunity for the city, the school district, and South Valley Athletics to work together, because the parklands we own, the school district owns other infrastructure that is used as park space as well, recreation locations, and finding a way to work those together into a method, and exploring the option of having even a, what was it called, an operating levy, or a local option on school district boundaries that could then help fund this collaborative group that would then represent the city and the school and South Valley Athletics, rather than having a whole separate another board. So we're exploring other options that might be similar but have a little different twist to it.
So as a follow-up to that, do these things, are they typically not created after the other special districts are? Because nobody wants to share that portion that they're already getting. So they're.
Councilor Soulsby?
Thank you. I just want to I know that most of the community members that spoke tonight are gone already, but I do want to thank them all for coming and sharing their concerns, and to let them know that their concerns are valid. They're not falling on deaf ears, and that I share a lot of the same concerns. And we are going to be exploring all options that we can, and to remind people that there is a meeting on July 18th to look at different options for homeless camps, and invite people to attend that.
Councilor Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to thank all the citizens that came in tonight to voice their concerns. That is democracy. I was quoted in the paper saying that, I agree that place is big enough to do something, but that doesn't mean that I am set in cement on using it. There's still a lot of discussion to go on. So I just want to say that I did hear all your concerns, and hopefully as a community we can move forward. Thank you.
So I just want to, Friday night, last Friday, I had the first meeting with the task force of the 25 mayors throughout Oregon on homeless, and it was pretty much just kind of meeting everybody. We did it virtually, and it was interesting. The mayor of Dayton was in the middle of a boat in Crane Prairie, because that's the only place you could get reception. But I'd never met the mayor of Vail before, so it was kind of just getting to know everybody so we could work on things. And you wouldn't think Vail would have a problem, but Idaho, pot's illegal. So they come across the border and then they stay there. So, it's an issue in Vail. And if you don't know where that's a little town out of Ontario. It's a little hole in the wall. But and then Thursday I have a meeting with Pete Kearns from Serenity Lane, and so we're going to look at bringing some kind of treatment rehab here. And I think right now we just went down the idea, the concept of looking into that to apply for the grant. But if we were to get the grant, I really think we need to really have some serious heart-to-heart, hearing that many people in here. And I really commend the people for being so respectful in the audience tonight that were out there. Touchy subject like that, it'd be easy to get out of hand, but they were really good. But, maybe if we were going to really pursue that, we do something like we did with the cedar trees or the redwoods and, do a parking lot meeting. Councilor Fleck?
Yeah, I was going to not really comment because we don't know if we can afford it. We don't know if we're going to get a grant, so I wasn't going to really spend a lot of issue on the property per se. But I did hear a lot of comments tonight that make it really clear most of the folks have not been following this issue, and I would encourage all folks to read all of the materials that have been presented, the court cases, the legislative action, so at least we're all talking about, and there are still lots of options out there for us to pursue. So, nothing is set in stone. I will say there's many appealing, facets to that. This is, proposed to be managed. A lot of the comments were, obviously our biggest fears, hit us when it, something's going to affect our well-being. And so, property values or security or, all of these, I think all of us can agree are legitimate concerns and certainly need to be addressed. But I think going into this with evidence or information on what we're talking about, the laws, what we can do, what we can't do, I think is really important. So I would encourage folks to follow. Definitely come to those future meetings.
Councilor Savage?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo kind of what I've heard this evening, saying thank you to the folks who spoke tonight. I really appreciate the respectfulness that was shared. I appreciate the concerns. I get it. I'm a half a mile away. I'm very close to that site. I have 3 kids that play in the street, so I get it and I understand it and I don't disagree. I appreciate when somebody brings another suggestion, so I appreciate that. Somebody one time told me, why bring me a problem? Bring me a solution. So I'm hearing a lot of concerns. I appreciate that they were shared. I would like to hear more solutions. So I'm grateful that we had lots of concern tonight. I'm grateful that folks talked. I heard a couple different solutions and I'd love to entertain that. I'm really looking forward to July 18th. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, business from the city manager. Now, do we go into executive session now? Okay. So city council for Cottage Grove will now meet in executive session to consult with staff designated to negotiate real property transactions, ORS 192660, which allows council to meet in executive session, deliberate with persons designated by governing body to negotiate real property transactions, and ORS 192.6602, which allows council to meet in executive session, deliberate with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of news media and designated staff should be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed to not report on any deliberations during executive session except for state the general subject of the session. As previously announced, no decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we will return to open session and council may take action before adjourning the meeting. We need to turn
the speakers outside off. And we need to switch meetings here. So we're going to close this down and go into the executive session meeting. Mark Wolf, our attorney, is Well, he was on, he's getting ready to log in under the
Which
executive.
one is it?